was. Most of you have this back. It was, I mean, let's be honest, it was basically completion. I corrected some of your answers along the way, but I only counted off for blanks, okay? So if you wrote something, if you wrote like Dallas Cowboys are better than the Denver Broncos, I probably gave you credit because I saw that you put. My point is, it was a completion type of thing, and if you had any points off, it was based on a blank. Now, I corrected you along the way. Eric, there you are. Did you get yours? Did you get yours? Okay. I corrected some of yours along the way. That is not to say I corrected every single one of them. But if I saw that your answer was wrong or whatever, I did correct some with my red pen. But again, the points off were simply based on whether you did it or you didn't do it. You might even call that just a try grade, okay? Some of you did not even turn one in. So, you know, public announcement, if you want to turn one in, you still can. But it is hanging out in the grade book as a zero test, you know, zero test grade right now. So if that's you, if that zero got your attention, good. Today, next thing for you, some of you will, you know, some of you have to take the final and some of you don't. I have created your last study guide. This does not come with a scavenger hunt. It does not come with anything to do, but this just whittles down 4 big units. I mean big units, guys. This world history class had some big units. Most classes would probably whittle that down into, or, you know, most classes would probably call that 7 or 8 units. We call it 4. Anyhow, I have whittled down what is the big, the things you should focus on for the final exam. Some of you are flat out exempt from that, and you have tuned me out. That's fine. Others of you might be really interested in this study guide because it's going to focus your attention. All the things we said are good and important. Put it up. All the things we said are good and important, but let's be honest, when you're rolling into a test, you probably want to know what is on it, and this is what's going to focus your attention. Some of you have to take the exam. Of course, it counts as a grade. Some of you, if whatever your grade is looking like, if it's borderline, you don't have to take the exam. In terms of like your exemptions, you can exempt it. You don't have to take it, but you want to. If you take it and it hurts you, I will stick with your exemption. If you take it and it helps you, I will put it in, and that's good. So I don't exactly know who might be in that situation. If you want to talk about, is that for you? We can talk about that, but Kurt, I got this right here for you. Y'all are sitting slightly different, and I'm fine with that because today is going to be a conversation, right? I'll call it a lot of our classes conversations because I feel like as soon as you say class, did I forget you?
No. Who won the game?
Man, why would you?
I already know it. I just want to see if you.
I'm aware that you probably already know it. Yeah, the game. Did you hear me screaming from all the way across Alma? Did you hear me screaming? You probably did.
I heard a fight screaming.
You probably did. Now, what you really heard was me getting quiet for a lot, and then on certain plays it was like, yeah, get him, no, stuff like that. Anyway, it was not the Army team's best football game, but you know what? Those guys on the Navy side, when they woke up the next morning, they were still in the Navy, and that sucks. So, no, it's good football, and 363 more days we'll be Navy. 363 days until the next Army Navy football game. I appreciate y'all caring enough to dog on me about that. And I will say that video we made, I posted it on a West Point group, and it got like 1 billion views. So people knew Alma, Georgia, from all across the West Point world. So some of y'all were hiding. I watched it several times, like look at everyone's little face and reaction. Some of you were like hiding in the background, not sure what Christian was trying to do, probably something mischievous like usual. Jackson was like, yeah. Anyway, today, conversation, okay? I've called a lot of our classes conversations. In fact, that's the word I've started to use. I feel like as soon as you say class, it's like, you got to take notes and it's for a grade. But if we're having a conversation with each other, we all have the opportunity to grow. Well, today's class is definitely not a must take notes or anything like that. Which one of you wants to?
Christian wants that one. I think that one's the lowest grade.
All right.
I have a
Yeah, don't
Sure,
just,
I'll take it.
Kurt's my favorite right now. Kurt will. Today's class is exactly that, a conversation. I'm simply handing you out a little bit of an info sheet. Okay, it's front and back. Just an info sheet on Afghanistan. And like I told you at the end of last week, on Friday of last week, today we're going to talk about my deployment story. I'm going to tell you kind of real world what it was like to be in Afghanistan, a little bit of myself to you. And of course, I am going to bring a little bit of the academic perspective to it. We're going to, how should I tell a story? Well, in terms of our class, we learned about the grapes of various civilizations. Now, the poster fell down, but can you remember what grapes is? What's the G? Geography, R. Religion, A. Achievements of that particular society. P. Politics or the political structure. E. Economy. Everybody makes money somehow. And S.
Statistics.
Social structure. Not quite. Social structure, right? You know, the pecking order. Who's the leader? Who's the follower? And why? Thank you, sir. So I think the way to tell you a good story about Afghanistan for our class is to take you through the grapes of Afghanistan. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Get my side screen up so I can know. It is going to be a lot of talking, and I don't know if you can tell, I'm pretty close to talked out. This weekend, last weekend of this weekend, I was like, couldn't even talk anymore. So I'll do the best I can with all my talking. I have already said that we may not take a bathroom break, depending on where we're at now. I hope what that means to you is it's interesting enough that you're clued in. I got a lot of pictures and a couple of videos showing you what the war in Afghanistan was like. But we're not like that. If you really like real talk, just up front, if you need to take a bathroom break, one at a time, one boy, one girl, just take my pass and go. And we're grown up enough to do that. Just take my pass and slip out. It's gonna be fine. Afghanistan, the grapes of Afghanistan. So what you see here, this is a picture of American soldiers dressed up like Afghan locals, and this model very much influenced what I did in Afghanistan. In fact, you're going to see a lot of pictures of me dressed up in what is, looks like that local garb. Almost looks like we went native or tried to fit in with the locals. The model that I was going for in my deployment was to try to influence from the village up. Not to influence the president, not to worry about the geopolitics, but to actually deal with the village level. And I think it's really easy to understand here in Alma, because we're a pretty small town. The area I was in was a pretty small town, and we were trying to influence one tribe at a time, just like it says there. And this model was pioneered by a special forces soldier, and he's in the picture there. And he took this, this is the first team to ever do this. They're the ones who put on the local clothes. They made friends with the natives. They built an army of local Afghans, and then they influenced from the village level up. So this is the first group that did this, and because Major Jim Gant and his group did this, that really influenced my deployment about 2 years later. So you can see this on the screen today. This is a class I brought to my Army ROTC students several years ago, and I still leave the same pictures on there because that's how I built the class and the slides. Some of the stuff is like very Army. And I understand that that's not what this class is. I'll try to not speak in the acronyms. I'll try to say things in the way that you can understand it. But if at any point I say something that just doesn't make sense to you, it's an acronym or something like that, that's probably me like diving back into my Army talk. And if you need me to explain it, I will be happy to. So just like you saw that picture there, that is me right there in the white turban. I've worn that turban in this class. Part of trying to bring history alive to you is I've brought out some of my personal artifacts. But just like those guys were influencing one tribe at a time in 2011, come to the year 2013, which is when I was in Afghanistan, we were trying to do exactly the same thing. So did I have my weapon? Yes. Did I have my kit? Yes. But at the same time, part of it was trying to show that we were fitting into the local culture. And that is a picture on the back side of the handout I gave you. So you can just, you can look at that picture if you care to. But I'm the only American in that picture. Everyone else there is, some of them are Afghan policemen. I know their loyalty. Others, I'll be honest, their loyalty was questionable. Now, were they trying to hurt me in the moment? No, they're trying to be my friend right in the moment. But the guy on the far left, a lot of people said that he was Taliban. What does Taliban mean? I know you guys probably think that means the enemy. A lot of times it's just a political ideology, just like people would be called a communist, or just like people would be called a witch in the Salem witch trials era. Sometimes people got accused of being Taliban, whether they were or weren't. So all that to say is I never turned my back to these people I didn't know. And of course, someone's taking the photo, and I got I have American soldiers all around me that you can't see in the picture there. But I never turned my back to the people I didn't know. And I'll just tell you, that's a hard way to live. That's a hard way to live for 9 months, never really trusting who you're around, even though you want to. And I'll tell you, my human nature is that I wanted to trust the people that I was around, but I still had to have that caution. Were they my friends or not? I always had to have that caution. And that's difficult. That's a difficult way to live, always being on guard and on edge for 9 months straight. So anyway, that's kind of the setup. Grapes of Afghanistan, here we go. So big Afghan overview. This is printed on your page. I'm not going to dive into each one of these, but remember in my closeout class last week, I said not everybody does things the way I do them, and that's okay. That's a big lesson I learned in my time in Afghanistan. Extremely different culture. Religion is a big one, right? It's a Muslim-dominated country where we come from a Judeo-Christian values country. How they make money, totally different. And then upper left, I think that's just a stark difference as well, the life expectancy. They would call midlife age 25. So when I was there at the time, I was 24, I was basically in the middle, I was midlife for what they would expect. Now, an American who expects to live into their 70s, 80s, and 90s, a 20-year-old is kind of at the beginning of life. But that's just a big, stark difference in their cultural perspective versus ours, down to their life expectancy. Men and women have a much shorter life expectancy. So I'm not gonna go over just like every little nugget on this slide there, but you got that on the page in front of you. Let's talk about the geography. Where exactly are we talking about? So everybody point at America. Everybody point at Georgia. Bring yourself to Southeast, right? So you can see it was a long trip to get to Afghanistan. Afghanistan is what is highlighted in red. It is technically in Asia. Now, we say Asia, you probably think like Japan and Chinese and the facial features that come with an Asian person. Afghanistan is a part of Asia, just not the typical Asia that a lot of times we think of. That's stereotype, right? When we say Asian is Chinese, not only, Asia is also Afghanistan and India, etc. So there's kind of a bust and a stereotype right there. So boom, that's the big geography. Obviously, it's on the other side of the world. Here is some of the on-the-ground geography of Afghanistan. Now, I didn't take this picture. Most of the pictures you'll see in the presentation today, I didn't take this particular picture, but I use this picture right now to show you in one shot the stark differences of the geography of Afghanistan. You have the mountains, the deadly high peaks, high altitude, places where the bad guys can go and hide because you can't really get up there and hunt them. You have the mountains, and then at the same time you have the lush river valleys, feeds into the water. Water is life, right? So in one photograph here, we got both the highs and the lows of Afghanistan. There's also an arid desert type of atmosphere, and I was in a dried up riverbed. So whereas you see the water there, I had almost a dried up, dusty path that my vehicles could follow on a former river, and I'll show you a variety of pictures there. But all that to say is, in Afghanistan, you had to consider it all. You had to consider what would I need for to do a patrol in the mountains, what would I need to cross a stream, creek, or river on foot or in my vehicles, and that is just to say you couldn't think of just one thing. We're going to get real good in the mountains. We're going to get real good on foot. We're going to get real good by patrolling in our vehicles. No, man, you had to be good at all of it because Afghanistan was so diverse. Bit of a geography map here, and if you're reading the key in the lower right, you can see how the elevation chart shows differences, brown being the real peaks. So there are the two different sets of mountains, the Hindu Kush to the north and east, and that is where Osama bin Laden was known to be hiding in September of 2001. That's where the first fighting happened because he was in the Hindu Kush mountains. Of course, there's mountains in the Central Highlands as well, where you see the brown. All that to say, there's almost everything in this single chunk of land. Now, if I had to take it back 2 slides, kind of go to this right there, that little patch of red, what's a comparison that you could make it to? Like, what's a U.S. American state that you think is about that size?
South Carolina.
No,
that's
too small.
Hawaii.
Too small.
Texas?
Texas is right. Afghanistan, it's not like cut and paste. You can't just plop Texas right on top of it and it's the exact same shape. But in terms of size, Afghanistan is just about the same as Texas. So talking about all this geography inside of Texas is a large U.S. state, but of course our country is even larger than that. But all this geography inside of one small, one United State the size of Texas. This is Afghanistan. What's real notable? What do you not have in Afghanistan? What does it not border? Water of any sort. Now there's rivers and such, right? But it does not have a port access. It is landlocked. So that is super significant in terms of trade and travel because it's landlocked. There's not a port access at all. All right, moving on. Religion, religion. Well, it is a Muslim-dominated country. In fact, it is a theocracy. What have I told you is a theocracy?
Country is governed from religion.
A government based on a particular religion. And in Afghanistan, that is Islam, and it is particularly kind of the stricter side of Islam. So their government is not freedom of religion like we have. Choose what you want to as long as you follow the laws. No. Their government is their religion. So therefore, you can imagine it'd be very difficult to have any other religion inside of Afghanistan because you got to follow the religious laws to even exist there in the first place. This was not always the case. This became the case in the late 90s with the rise of the Taliban. Here's a really sad picture that shows a stark difference, but it also kind of shows the history of Afghanistan. On the left-hand side was a very progressive Afghanistan in the 60s. When, a lot of times what you guys probably think about Afghanistan is women have to be totally clothed. They have to cover their head to toe. You can only see their eyes. And that's the top right picture. That's the Afghanistan of today. But Afghanistan in the 60s, top left, was very progressive, modern. Women could dress like Western attire that you would wear today. Travel, airports, buses, good highways, not run down. Education available to all. Versus, take yourself to the right-hand side of the picture, Afghanistan is a country that went backwards. They made progress. They were on the world stage. People would travel to Afghanistan for vacation. You wouldn't even think of that today, right? You're going to go ski somewhere, you don't think of Afghanistan. But in the 60s and 70s, Afghanistan was at a height of positive progress. Afghanistan went backwards. It went backwards because of this rigid theocracy, Taliban rule that oppressed women and children and elevated the Islamic faith and male-dominated society. So really sad story of how Afghanistan went backwards in progress instead of, obviously, you want to think about going forwards in progress. Achievements. Well, this is kind of tongue-in-cheek. This is almost a joke, but an achievement of Afghanistan is that it is often called the graveyard of empires. Because of where it's located in the world, because of how it's landlocked, many different conquerors have had to travel through Afghanistan as they tried to conquer the wider region, to include Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, we talked about him, the British, the Russians, and then really unfortunately, I hate to say this, and it's really not a joke, the United States. We kind of found a bit of a demise in Afghanistan. We found a bit of a loss in Afghanistan. For all the good we did, we ultimately, I've actually had to update this whole conversation because of what happened recently this year, withdrawing in Afghanistan. I do think that we kind of lost in Afghanistan, and a lot of veterans, myself included, are still probably working through that. So what is an achievement in Afghanistan? Graveyard of empires. Wow, that's really notable. Politics. Afghanistan is called a Islamic Republic. And in fact, what I was trying to support was known as GIROA, G-I-R-O-A, Government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. I'll be honest, it was really weird to literally lay my life on the line to support an Islamic Republic. Now, from the bigger perspective, and as an American soldier and as an officer fighting in the Army, I knew that a stable Afghanistan was important to America, right? A terrorist-free Afghanistan meant that we wouldn't be attacked at home. But it was really weird to be supporting an Islamic Republic because that was not my personal beliefs, of course. But when Uncle Sam says go, you don't really have a choice. If you've signed on the line, right? You don't have a choice. So The government that we were supporting was the government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. First president, he's not the current president, but the first president was Hamid Karzai. Very famous name coming out of 2001. Your parents would definitely know him because he was the man that kind of helped Afghanistan find democracy and stability. He welcomed the United States for a very long time until he didn't, right? Until he got tired of us. He loved us there until he didn't. And in the end, kind of shows how everyone, a lot of times leaders achieve a peak. I'll just give you an American example. John F. Kennedy, right? He had a peak of fame and success and influence. He died at that peak, right? He was assassinated. So we remember Kennedy in really good light. If Kennedy had lived and he had been president for 4, 5, 6 more years, he might have declined in his popularity. But no, we'll never know. It's not what happened. But I think that's kind of what happened with Karzai. He had a peak of popularity, a lot of feel-goods on the world stage. This man is a great leader. But then he stayed in power, and he started to decline in his success and popularity. And kind of unfortunately, he ended on a low note instead of a high note. Anyway, I digress. Moving on. The economy of Afghanistan. It took me a long time to really try to figure out what they sold in Afghanistan. You know what they sell in Afghanistan mostly? Mother's Day bouquets. The flowers that you buy for your mom from the local grocery store probably came from Afghanistan. You believe me? You shouldn't. What is that flower, Eric?
Poppy.
Poppy. What does poppy make?
Opium.
What is opium?
Heroin.
Drugs. Yeah, heroin. Afghanistan exports opium used in heroin in the worldwide drug trade. That's how Afghanistan makes money. Now that farmer right there, is he a drug dealer?
No.
He's a flower grower, really, right? This is my experience. Most of the farmers who were growing this opium, guys, I walked through poppy fields. I walked through opium fields, right? Fields of drugs. Sometimes, I didn't do this, sometimes American, units would burn the opium fields, and then when the smoke drifted a particular direction, what happened? Everyone got high. Yeah, I'm serious. Like when you burn the poppy fields and the smoke, the ash drifted whatever direction, everyone who was in that direction would get high off of the, anyway. That guy's not a drug dealer. That guy's just making money for his family. The problem is that people buy that junk around the world, fuel the drug trade, and then since he knows that it makes money, he keeps growing it. So a real difficulty of our time in Afghanistan was how do we replace the opium trade with something more legitimate? And that is something that my unit was a part of. We were trying to show them how to grow legitimate crops, how to farm legitimate crops and trade them instead of opium. And a lot of times there's almost a trade involved. Like, hey, Mr. Farmer, if you will destroy your 50 acres of opium and replace it with tomatoes, we will give you $100,000 to get your farm going. A lot of money going around Afghanistan. That's a lot of money I would have liked to have personally. But we invested a lot of money in Afghanistan instead of because sometimes that's how you win, right? You just throw money at the problem, or at least people think that's how you win, and then that's how your country goes into debt. I digress. Opium. Afghanistan was known for opium. And then social structure, around out here with social structure, just like every society we talked about, there's a ruling class and there's an oppressed class. Okay, Afghanistan was no different. At the top, generally called the Pashtuns, and Pashtun is the dominant tribe. Now in Afghanistan, everything they do not start with, essentially. We celebrate, like I'm proud to be an American, right? We got our red, white, blue t-shirts, right? America, we celebrate the 4th of July. We have a national identity. We're proud to be Americans. They don't wake up and say, I'm an Afghan. I'm really proud to be an Afghan. I identify with my larger country. They start with their tribe, right? Tribe is kind of lower level on the pecking order. You might chip up to your province and then eventually to your country, which we might say state and then country. But a lot of us here would say, I'm an American, I'm from Georgia, and yeah, I'm proud to be a Red Raider too. We start with that top identity and chip down. They start with that lower identity. I'm from this tribe, and yeah, I'm in the country of Afghanistan. But their strongest loyalty is to their tribe. So that is a very unique part of the social structure in Afghanistan, and you've got to know that to start dealing with those people. You can't appeal to some sense of national pride, like, hey man, don't you want to like shape up this area so that you can help Afghanistan? You'd be like, Afghana, what? Like, who cares? No, I'm Pashtun. I'm Pashtun. Like, I care about my tribe more than that. So it's almost reverse of what we would think. We have a lot of national pride, and yeah, okay, our local area is important too. They start with their local, their family name, their tribal name, and then, maybe chip on up to that national identity. All right, I'm going to do what I said we weren't going to do. That was the grapes of Afghanistan. Talk. I know that was me doing a lot of talking. That was the academic side of it. Before I dive into all my pictures, okay, and this is where all my pictures are going to come in, we will take a bathroom break because otherwise I know we'd be sitting here for just way too long. So let's take that bathroom break, shake it out, and when we come back, I'll be showing you all of my pictures. Mostly, I also need a cough drop. All right, shake it out. Take that long walk. Drop the temperature in this room real quick. Big drop. Can you take mine right now? Oh, okay, right. Is there not an update or whatever? Oh, okay. Are you taking it or you're simply checking it?
Nope, I'm just checking it.
Excellent, thank you.
sweeping it to the span.
Put the hat on top.
Yeah. Using the actions and stuff like that.
I got alcohol.
Hey, he said Jackson, he said you can close the windows.
The windows. Y'all can shut that window. It's trying to.
The window's been open. Okay. I'm trying to help you.
No, stop. Stop, you're making it worse.
Guys, Christian might get his first girlfriend from your mom.
No, no,
It's not that.
it's not, it's not like that.
All right, that was probably more about Afghanistan than. Are you not strong enough to get it down?
No, I was just gonna be good.
It's pretty. It's pretty close.
Yeah, I was just gonna
good out
Yeah, it's on the chill side.
Cold. Oh my gosh.
All right. That was probably more about Afghanistan than you ever expected to need to know in your life. And I'll be honest, like when I share with you, I know more about Afghanistan now than I did when I was there. Right? Isn't that the crazy thing? Like I wish I had been a good studier, a better studier before I went to Afghanistan. I wished I had studied the people and the traditions and the history before I went. Now I did a fair job of learning the area before I went. But in hindsight, in the 8 years since I've come home from Afghanistan, I've wanted to understand better what I was fitting into. So I've studied Afghanistan better afterwards than I did before. So maybe there's like 2 life lessons there. One, be prepared for whatever life is going to ask of you. Don't fail to study before you go on the vacation. Afghanistan wasn't a vacation. So do the studying before you go into your work project, not after. And then 2, be a lifelong learner, right? I wasn't unprepared. I wasn't ill prepared. But since I have, I've had this personal curiosity in understanding Afghanistan. So what I gave to you was probably more than you ever imagined you would be told about Afghanistan. I understand that was a lot to chew on. This next chunk, that was the grapes of Afghanistan. This next chunk is my deployment story or Afghan adventure told in the 5 W's. Right? Because how do you think like a historian? Who, what, when, where, why, and how. And yes, sometimes it felt like teeing off on a hand grenade. Being in Afghanistan was like teeing off on a hand grenade. So let me tell you exactly where I was. We'll start with the where. I've already showed you this, right? America, Georgia, that's Afghanistan. So let's zoom in more to Afghanistan. This is all of Afghanistan, that landlocked country, no water around. Well, now what's highlighted in red, that is a province, and the best comparison for us to understand would be like county, right? We're in Georgia, Bacon County. We have neighboring counties. They're rivals in terms of sports, but we also help each other in terms of the economy, whatever. That highlighted red chunk, it's called a province, but it's probably best understood like we have a county. Now, in terms of Afghanistan being the country, the province is almost like a state. But in terms of the size, it's almost like a county. Does that make sense? We go from one level to the next. The yellow star, that is exactly where I was in that province. So the province of Aruzgan, the district of Shahidi Assas, and the word is at the top of the screen, and then the actual village was called Sarah. So this is the district, which you might, this might be the county level as well. And then the actual area I was at is this yellow star. It's called Sarah. I already told you it was on this dried up riverbed. It was not lush. It was not flowing. It did not, water is life. We didn't have any water. What we had was a dried up riverbed, and that greatly influenced kind of the poverty of the area. Because we didn't have water, we had a whole lot of, the people that we were dealing with had a whole lot of poverty. And it was an inability, they weren't able to grow crops. They weren't able to raise animals very effectively because there was such a lack of water. And then we tried to address that issue by building a water reservoir project. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second, but it wasn't very effective either, just because there's so little water available. Water truly is life. That's the where, taking you from big Afghanistan to the state, to the county, to the city. And then when? I went to Afghanistan late 2012 to about the middle of 2013. my one deployment. I know a lot of people in the past 20 years have relatives, family members that, or just a lot of service members in general have done multiple deployments, right? He went to Iraq 5 times. He went to Afghanistan 9 times or whatever. Wow. I went to Afghanistan just 1 time. Now, all deployments are different. Some deployments are a full year. Some deployments are 90 days. That's like 3 months. My deployment was 9 months long, late November to early 2000 or to middle of 2013. That's the win. Who did I go with? Who did I deal with? So I'm going to tell you several different categories here. First is my soldiers. Who did I go with? I went with my soldiers. I went with 2 squad. Now, I went with my whole battalion from Fort Stewart, but we split up. We immediately split up when we got to the country, and we kind of fell in on different areas of the country. So who was I most directly with? I was with 2 squads of 3rd ID soldiers, 3rd Infantry Division soldiers from Fort Stewart. Alone and unafraid in the middle of Afghanistan with about 18 Americans. That's who I was with. We were also with a couple of Special Forces soldiers. It was a really unique mission. I'm not Special Forces, right? They are Special Forces qualified, but we fit with each other, and we worked together side by side. So the Special Forces guys, and I kind of just told you about the Army football uniforms were a tribute to Special Forces soldiers in Afghanistan. They are trained to work with more people. If they are one person, they grow an army based off of their expertise. So 1 or 2 SF guys, Special Forces guys, can really grow a force around them. So that's why having 2 Special Forces operators was really significant. It was confusing because I had to report to a whole bunch of different people. I had my regular unit out of Fort Stewart. That's kind of like mommy. I had the Special Forces guys, right? And I had their commander and their boss wanting reports, kind of like daddy. And then really strangely, this just gets into the military hierarchy and how confusing chain of command can become sometimes. We fell under SEAL Team 10. I didn't work with SEALs. I'm definitely not a SEAL. I make all the jokes in the world about SEALs. But we fell under SEAL Team 10. And they wanted my reports as well, right? So that gets to how important your writing might be. 24-year-old me was writing stuff to the SEAL Team 10 commander. I never expected to be doing that in my life. So all that to say, sometimes life isn't really seamless. Sometimes you don't have just one boss. I had a lot of different bosses. I also had a bunch of different people who kind of came and helped my unit from time to time. I had people from the Navy, right? I make all the jokes about the Navy in the world, but I had some Navy radio specialists. Those guys were crucial because they were able to help my radios always be working. I had interpreters. We talk about how people have different languages, right? In these different societies, sometimes the difficulty is interpreting the language and what's being said. Well, I don't speak Afghan. I don't speak any of the dialects. I had to rely on interpreters to get my message across. I'll tell you just kind of a personal story. Sometimes when I work with Mrs. Straub, she's the ESOL instructor, right? She helps me communicate in Spanish sometimes. I feel like I'm using an interpreter back in Afghanistan because I'll say my message in English, she'll interpret or she'll translate it in Spanish, and we're trying to make sure that we're saying the same thing. So same process here. Here in Alma, we might have the difference of English versus Spanish, but in Afghanistan, it was English, which is what I spoke, and there's a bunch of different dialects in Afghanistan. So the interpreters were super important. And then I also worked with a whole bunch of different government and police leaders, and I'm going to show you a bunch of those pictures right now. This is the team I went to war with. These are the barrel-chested freedom fighters from Fort Stewart, Georgia. And I think, I love being right here in Alma because so much of my Army story is in Georgia as well. I met my wife out of while I was at Fort Stewart, and you guys should be super proud of your Georgia-based 3rd Infantry Division. So this is not some story that you can't connect with. All these guys started in Savannah, Georgia, but ended up in Afghanistan. So this is the team that I went to war with. Obviously, that's Afghanistan in the background. You can see the mountains. This is my battle buddy. I referenced a couple times this semester, battle buddies. Hey, partner up, get a battle buddy. This is Corey Moore. Corey was a sergeant. I was a lieutenant. We were battle buddies. We had different roles, but we were the 2 leaders of this team right here. We cared for all these soldiers. We planned all our missions, and we had a little bit of fun, too, every now and then. By the way, that flag you see in the background right there is the flag that's outside on the wall right now. I took that flag from Afghanistan. It was at my base. when I got there, and when we closed our base. That's part of my story. I'll tell you about that in a second. When we closed our base, I took that flag. I have not displayed that flag anywhere in my life until we got here. You know, I've moved it with us. Every time we move, I've cared for it, kept it kind of, you know, climate controlled and all that kind of stuff. But it's the flag that's hanging right outside right now. So that flag started in Afghanistan. This is another one of my key leaders, one of my squad leaders. And I'm telling you all this to say that whatever job you have, you're going to have a team around you. This is Vincent, Sergeant Vincent Clausen. He was a very important squad leader to me. Oh, sorry, that's Corey again. Bunch of these pictures, you can see our personalities, right? You can see that we're not just these robotic soldiers. We're definitely not killing machines, right? We actually didn't fire our weapons very much at all. But we're just kind of goofy guys who like to take pictures as well, while still doing a very important job in a professional way. This is my other squad leader, Vincent. A lot of times we sat around and drank tea and ate food, right? That's how we connected with the local population. They don't sit in chairs, right? They sit crisscross applesauce, or however you want to say it. So we would do that as well. I'm telling you this to show you how you got to build a team wherever you are in life. Whether you're working an assembly line, whether you're working on a logging truck, whether you're working for pipe or at power lines, whatever team you're on, your teammates matter to you. And these were my teammates. I did not do this job by myself. I could not have possibly been successful by myself. My teammates matter. Question?
What type of tea is that? Is that
Good. The tea's called chai. It is yellow. It looks like urine, right? Don't drink yellow snow. But the tea's called chai. Is literally, so not packaged, not your little Lipton tea bag or anything like that, right? They literally just place the leaves into a pot of water. It would boil. That's the color it would come out. And then they bring out sugar. We usually, we like to sweeten things, and they realize that Americans like to sweeten things. They bring out sugar, but not your like packaged paper bag of sugar that you get at Food Line. They bring out blocks of sugar, literally chunks of sugar. So sometimes I'll take a cube of sugar, and again, not like a sugar cube like you feed a horse, but almost like a crystal rock of sugar. Put it in the tea, stir it up. Very incredible cultural experience. Again, sitting and eating because we sat and ate all the time. Like that's how we made friends. This is a big idea. That's how we didn't get shot at. I never got shot at by someone I ate with. I only got shot at by the people I didn't eat with. So my big life takeaway is sit down and have a meal, get to know someone, and they probably won't shoot at you. Well, if you can sit down and converse with someone, and you may not have to deal with getting shot at, but you got enemies in life? I bet you do. I bet you got some gripes with some people in life. If you can sit down and eat with them, you're probably going to get to know each other in a way that humanizes each other, and maybe, just maybe, you're not going to have that fight anymore. I never got shot at by someone I ate with. These are the two special forces guys that I met and worked with in Afghanistan. I'm still in contact with them today. Probably closest to the guy in the middle. His name is Adam, and then the guy on the right, his name is Jake. And of course, as you can see, we are dressed out in local attire, getting ready to go to a meeting, a village meeting, and just try to shake hands, meet people, and solve problems. That's what we did at the village level. That's why we wore their local clothes. We wanted to connect with them. Instead of shooting, instead of making war, we wanted to solve problems. And yeah, we carried weapons because you never know what might happen. But our big idea was that we just wanted to solve problems by getting to know each other. And that's why we wore the local clothing. This is Adam on a different mission. We're not wearing the local clothing. We're wearing our regular kit. And then this is Jake. Jake was my running partner in Afghanistan. We would very frequently just kind of leave our base and go out for a couple kilometers, climb to the next peak, whatever it was, carried our handguns, but we had a generally secure area. Like I said, you always got to be cautious, and I never really had trust in any of the Afghans. We always were concerned with what could happen next. But Jake and I did get to go on some pretty cool runs, and you can see the background, and you can see just how awesome it is there. Yes, ma'am?
What happened to the mustache?
My mustache? Yeah. So in the Army, where's that picture right there? I got another one that's even worse. In the Army, obviously shaving is a big deal. It's part of discipline. It's part of looking professional. I've never been in a situation where I could grow a beard. Some guy, like special forces guys, which is why Jake and Adam have a good beard. Sometimes those guys are permitted to grow a beard. Regular infantry guys like myself, we always have to maintain clean shaven except in this circumstance. I was given permission to grow a beard, which is hilarious because I couldn't back then. I think in the end we went like 43 days without shaving, trying to fit into the local culture. But here's the why. It's not just because beards are cool. It's not just because they're manly or whatever you think about beards. It's because in the Afghan culture, elders had facial hair. Young men did not, older men did. And we wanted to be seen as fitting into the local culture. You want to be respected like an elder. So our chain of command, our military chain of command gave us permission to have the beard type facial hair instead of staying clean shaven. Now, if you can't grow a beard and you're gonna look like a doofus growing a beard, you better shape that mustache in a way that looks decent. Anyway, we went about 43 days without shaving before we had to kind of go back to our traditional chain of command. So that is the longest I've ever gone without shaving. It's itchy, it's disgusting, and it's not for me. I can't grow a beard. Some of you will grow beards before before high school is over. Me personally, I can't. So there's a couple more nasty Swanson mustache pictures coming up here in a second as well. This guy right here, he's in the Navy. I said beat Navy to him every single day we woke up. This was in the middle of Army's long losing streak, so it wasn't really effective because his football team was better than mine back then. But I show you this, but his name is Frazier. I always want to tell you everybody's name because their story matters. Frazier, if you wanted to find Frazier, all you had to do was look up. This is on a rooftop. Frazier was our radio guy. Frazier was always keeping us in contact with our higher headquarters, and they could have been dozens, if not even hundreds of kilometers away. Frazier was the one that could call in helicopters if I needed them. Frazier was the one that could call in bombs from the sky if I needed them. So Frazier was super important to me. Did not matter that he was in the Navy. Did not matter that I like to, beat Navy. Frazier's a member of my team. So all that to say, sometimes you might have a rivalry with someone. You guys might not like Ware County. You guys might not like Jeff Davis County. But guess what? Sometimes you got to work together, build a team. Whether you think you're rivals or not, you got to build a team and work together. So Frazier was a super important member of my team. Halfway through, he got replaced by this guy named Adam. So both of them were in the Navy. Both of them were super important to me. These were my interpreters. The three that you see with the wood background, those are local Afghans. And they were born and raised in Afghanistan. They learned English. So I'm going to say that they are more academically advanced than I am, like way more. They know Pashtun, which is a difficult language. They learned English. So a lot of times we think, Afghanistan is backwards. They don't even have a school or university. These guys are multilingual, okay? And it's usually not just two. Like if they've got English, they've also got French, and they've also got Indian, like these guys are multilingual. Really impressed. Don't judge someone who might be struggling with English because guess what? They're probably multilingual and they are more academically advanced than you. Just because they struggle with English doesn't mean that they're not more advanced or super intelligent in other regards as well. So those interpreters are super important. The guy on the lower right, his name is Adam, and he is an American. He was in Afghanistan as a contractor, and he's probably my most reliable interpreter because he obviously he's an American, right? He would start with English and translate it in Pashtun. He could also kind of sometimes spot check them, and he'd be like, hey, what he just interpreted is not what you just said. And I don't think those guys ever interpreted something wrong on purpose, right? They weren't being tricky or anything like that. But every now and then, interpretation is tough. Like if I say, good job, maybe I say, good job. Good job. Whatever, dude, good job. Right? You can say the same phrase several times and mean it differently. Adam would always make sure that the right tone was there with the interpretation as well. So same story, like I just told you, working with Ms. Straub, trying to translate from English to Spanish, same way that I would have to work these guys. And Julia, that's probably the maximum of my nasty beard that I was able to grow in Afghanistan when I took that picture right there. Finally, these are some of the local Afghans that we worked with. On the far right, his name is Haji Razik. What do you know about Haji Razik just based on his name? Muslim, okay. What's a Haji? Remember that?
Somebody who traveled in there.
Yes, so Haji is actually a label, like we might say doctor or professor or reverend. Haji is someone who has completed the Hajj. sometime in his life, and I don't know his whole story, but sometime in his life, he has completed the pilgrimage to Mecca in Saudi Arabia. He has paid homage to all the holy sites in Mecca, so he gets the label Haji Razik. He was the village mayor. Very small town, right? Again, maybe kind of comparable to Alma. Very small town. He was the village mayor. Guy on the far left, that is Commander Lala. I'm not making that up, right? He was the village, he was the chief of police in our area. So maybe like Chief Andre here in Alma, he was our chief of police. And then the other fella in the camouflage uniform, his name was Captain Ula, and he is the local army commander that was in my area as well. So police, that is almost like a civil authority. And then army, that'd almost be like, say, if we have a National Guard armory in Douglas, more like a federal troop. So did they work together? Yes. Were they different? Yes. These were my key guys. As I tried to connect with the village, as I tried to shape things, these are the guys I dealt with. Y'all, I was 24 years old, working with village elders, army commanders, and chiefs of police in the middle of nowhere, Afghanistan. I was a little in over my head, but I was still the guy they looked at. I woke up and I had to have answers, right? So you may be thrust into a situation you feel you're not ready for sometimes in life. You got to trust your background, trust your training, and do the best you can in every new situation. This is Haji Razik, just a little bit of a closer up. He had a very tan complexion. He was this is hard for me to say, or hard for me to describe. He's a very pretty man, right? I think that beard had a whole lot of just for men in it, okay? He kept himself very cleanly. The village was kind of on the dirty side, okay? There was, hygiene was not the best. Running water was not always available. But my man, Haji Razik, he was always tight, all right? He was always clean and kept and hygienic. I don't know what his secret was, but I definitely think he had some just for men in that big black beard right there. This is Commander Lala, just a little bit of a closer up. What does it look like he has in his hands there?
Grenade.
Not a grenade.
Jail.
Huh?
Pomade.
What's that?
Pomade.
Pomade. Okay. What else comes in a tin? Dip. Right. He's got a dip can. Except that is not Skull. That is not wintergreen or long cut or whatever guys dip around here. That is an Afghan special called Naswar. Now it's not drugs. Okay. It's not the opium or anything like that. It is just the strongest lip tobacco that you could ever possibly imagine. So my soldier right there, his name's Travis. He was a big dipper. Okay, homeboy always had his fat lip in, right? He dipped all the time. So these guys traded dips for a second. Travis was like, hey, you want to try mine? And I can try some of yours. Again, that's part of like getting to know each other, exchanging gifts and getting to trust each other. My man Travis, who could like dip anything, right? He got knocked flat out by this Naswar, right? He got sweaty and red and goofy and gig. Like he was, I don't know, man. Like, I don't dip. It's not my thing. But Travis got knocked out by this Naswar. So it's definitely the strongest dip that you could ever possibly imagine. Next picture here. This is a new guy. I hadn't said his name yet. This is Sangari. Sangari in the red scarf there. He was the assistant chief of police. Okay, so a step behind Lala. This is Sangari is the one Afghan I almost trusted. Almost. The one Afghan I would almost be willing to turn my back to or be alone with or, like converse with each other without an extra security guard. Almost. And I wanted to. Guys, my nature is to be trusting. My nature is to build a team and have trust with each other. So it was real difficult to always be on guard. It was real difficult to kind of hold myself back and not fully trust these people. But Sangari is the one Afghan I almost trusted, and I always remember him. I'm not in touch with him. I'm not in touch with any of these people. Okay, I don't know what happened to some of them. A lot of American soldiers did stay in touch with the people they worked with. A lot of Afghans have come to the country recently, especially after Afghanistan, after we withdrew from Afghanistan. That's not my story. I didn't stay in touch with these guys. I don't have their emails. I don't have their phone numbers. So I'm kind of curious how things ended up. Like it's unfortunate. I think it's kind of unfortunate. I don't really have an answer because I don't know how things necessarily ended up. Overall, these are the Afghan police commanders that I worked with. So again, just showing how many different people I worked with, how many different relationships I had to juggle and manage as a young person in particular. And here is that Captain Ola, the Army commander, and the camouflage that I've worn in the past. That is actually that's his jacket. That's the jacket that I've worn in the past. Hanging on the clothes rack over there right now. He and I traded jackets right at the end of my time in Afghanistan. So he has my jacket, and I have his. These next two guys, these are my favorite, probably my favorite personalities. Definitely guys I wouldn't want to be alone with ever. The guy on the left, well, that's Jake on the right. That's an American soldier. But on the left, I don't know his name. I don't know his real name because I only know his nickname, and his nickname is Honey Badger. What does Honey Badger imply? Honey Badger don't give up. That's right. Honey Badger be crazy. Honey Badger got his nickname. Yeah. Honey Badger on opium. All right. Honey Badger was our local bomb clearance guy. He would go with us on patrols. If we were on foot, he'd walk in front of us. He'd clear the way of bombs. If we were in a vehicle, he'd get on his little motorbike. He'd go ahead of us, and he'd clear the way. Honey Badger got his nickname because of one particular instance. I wasn't there for this. This was like, a legend that happened before my unit got to Afghanistan. The story is that he was helping an American unit, and basically they walked through an area and they did hit a bomb. They hit a roadside bomb, an IED. And of course, he got angry about that because it's his job to protect everyone. I don't think anyone got hurt in that particular circumstance, which of course is good. But because that happens, and because that local village that they were passing through essentially like put a bomb in the path, what he did was he called women and children in front, and he called I shouldn't say women and children. He called everyone from the village to walk in front of the American forces and clear their own village. He said, "You gonna put bombs in our path? Well, you're gonna walk the road first." So that's how Honey Badger got the nickname, right? Because Honey Badger is crazy. Honey Badger did his job well, and my unit never walked into a bomb or never tripped a roadside IED or anything like that. But definitely crazy. What this picture is here is I'm riding in my vehicle. We got the real thick plate glass, like bulletproof plate glass. And I was trying to get him to enter my vehicle. I was like, "Bro, come on in. Like we got a mile to go. We'll just finish the ride like this. Come on in." He hops up like on the side of the vehicle, like the rear view mirrors right there, and he's just like cackling. Like, dude, get in the vehicle. He's like, "I good. No, I good. Anyway, Honey Badger, quite the personality. We employed a couple of local children, and these boys right here, they worked at our super tiny base. I'm going to show you a picture of our base here in a second. Maybe you can start to visualize it just a little bit better. Fella on the left, my best guess is that he's about 11 or 12, and they never told us his name, right? His real name, legal name, but we called him Commandant. Commandant means commander, military commander, so we called him the Commandant. And then that is his brother on the right-hand side. And here's another picture of them. They look a little sadder in this picture. The little man, we called him Zabita. Zabita means little sarge or little sergeant. So he kind of had military nicknames, Commandant and Zabita, little sergeant. So these boys, we employed them. They were super hard workers. Okay, they did some of the dirty work, took our trash out, made sure that we had a little clothesline for laundry and all. Like they did some dirty work, but by employing them, we were putting money into the local economy. We knew that they would take money home to their families. We never met their parents in particular, but we knew that we were creating jobs in the local economy. And sometimes they bring us information that was helpful as well. So these are two little boys. And the other thing is you can trust kids, right? It's a lot easier to trust kids than it is adults because kids are still like a youthful innocence related to kids. So sometimes the kids would bring us information that was useful and could help us out overall as well. So Commandant and Zabita, just remember we've been on the who category. Who did I deal with in Afghanistan? These are some of the who's that I dealt with in Afghanistan. Last semester, people were like, I don't have their contact info. They're like, again, just I don't have anyone's contact info. But last semester is like, man, he's cute. I wonder what he looks like now. All right, moving on to the what. So that was I've done the where and the when and the who. What in the world was I actually doing in Afghanistan? We had a 3-step model called security, governance, and development. And those are 3 steps that that you have to take in order. You got to have security first, right? You got to secure your area before you can do anything else. The next thing we would focus on is establishing a legitimate government. And then finally, after that, trying to develop projects in the area. So I'm going to tell you about all 3 of those steps. First, security. Who was I dealing with for security? Well, my big job was to run 7 checkpoints, 7 police checkpoints. You guys might call it like precincts or stations, right? And we might think of that today. But a good way to think of it is, if every now and then there's a DUI checkpoint coming in and out of town, we were running checkpoints basically like that. So making sure that only good people are flowing in and out, checking ID cards, checking the back of vehicles if we needed to, the back of wagons. I ran 7 local police checkpoints. The key was I didn't want to be responsible for them. Like ultimately, the best thing that could possibly happen is that when I say I mean the Americans, we step back from responsibility and we give it to the Afghans. We wanted the Afghans to start working for their own solutions. So the less that we did, it's not like saying we didn't want to work hard, but the less that we did, the better, because that means they were taking responsibility for their own country. Additionally, we're kind of working with a variety of the local bomb squad, interpreters, contractors. I got pictures to show all this. So this is my local base, right? When I talk security, you got to start with your own area, okay? So you think about the house you live in right now. You might lock the doors. When you leave your car, you're going to go boop, boop, right? You're going to lock what's valuable to you. This is the base that I had, and it doesn't look like much, does it? How much American money do you think is invested in this base?
$7.
Million.
About $3 million. Like realistically, it took about $3 million to build this little base. You can see on the hilltop, there's a kind of a second checkpoint. Let me take you on the inside real quick. This is kind of like the 4 corners of my base. So you can see we got this big courtyard where we kept all our trash. We got a little living shelter, which is that half-rounded tent. Got a couple more here. Have a little courtyard where we can play basketball as well. It wasn't much, but we did have a basketball hoop because we needed, people need downtime, people need to relax. The blue tanks right here, this is our fresh water. So we did have a fresh water. And then we had a rifle range, right? You got to keep training even while you're in the middle of the war zone. So we had a little rifle range right there. And this is our rooftop guard. We had a rooftop which we could see farther with. This is an example of a much smaller base. This is one of those checkpoints that I was in charge of. So a big deal that we had was how do you build a cheap base? What do you think's inside of this right here?
Sand.
Yeah, sand. It's just big sand boxes. You might think about sand bags, right? If you want to stop the a flood or something like that, you're going to fill up sand bags. These are called HESCO barriers, and you just fill them up with the earth. So how did we build our base? We literally raised the earth and used the earth to build our bases. Almost like the opposite of a trench line. Trench line digs into the earth. Well, we dug the earth, we built the earth above us, but still using the same concept. The earth stopped the bullets for us. So that's a smaller base. These are kind of a repeat picture here. These are the guys I dealt with for security. These were the police officers I dealt with. Something that's kind of really unique in their culture is that they almost kind of have this idol worship of their leaders. This is a police car, and this is the provincial police commander. It'd almost be like if every sheriff vehicle had a picture of Sheriff Batten inside of it, right? Brody's dad, everyone know Mr. Andy, Sheriff Andy, right? I just think it's funny that they had a picture of their police commander inside of their vehicles. And then what does an individual policeman look like? I showed you the commanders I was dealing with, but here's an individual policeman. Something they really like to do is decorate. They decorated their weapons, their helmets, their uniforms. So this guy, this is even on the light side, just the way he wrapped his buttstock there with red and white tape. These guys would bedazzle, bejewel, and bling out all their stuff. Cultural differences, right? But that's something that they would do. Here's a group here of Afghan Special Forces. They rolled through my area just real quick. Got to chat them up a little bit. So I don't know what you think Special Forces looks like, but those are Special Forces. That was security. Governance. Once we had a security established, my area was generally secure. we got to launch into governance. That's how you win, right? That's how you win in the area. If you're safe and secure, what you can start doing is focusing on the next higher thing, and having a government is the way that we are going to do that. This is Haji Razik again, and this picture represents how we would attend local village meetings almost weekly. Basically, the best comparison I could say is like a city council meeting. We'd go to city council meetings. People would sit crisscross applesauce, okay, not in seats, not in chairs, but they would sit on the ground. Their leaders would talk to them. They would talk back. They might say, the farming season has not been good. The Americans keep shooting at my cows, this, that, and the other, whatever. City council meeting. And that was progress. Because they were able to converse with each other and not shoot at each other, that was making progress. So Haji Razik, even with his Just for Men beard, he was a pretty important part of that process. This is, what you have?
Y'all shot big house.
Every now and then, so like let's just say that the field artillery like misfired or something like that, right? I'm thinking of a particular instance where one time a couple of rounds went over a mountain, which is kind of a misfire, and the guy came to the city council meeting to say, hey, the rounds that came over the mountain, they landed in my fields and kind of almost hit my livestock. So that is one particular instance where I had to apologize to that man. Good question. Good thing to latch on to, Eric. This is a higher level governor. This would be like Brian Kemp, okay? And he came and visited our small town. When's the last time Brian Kemp rolled through Alma, Georgia?
During the governor's race.
Did he come during the campaign season? That was before I was here. So point is, probably maybe once every 4 years or so, maximum. Alma is not exactly a bustling area to collect a whole bunch of votes in. Same for my area. My area was pretty small. The village of Sarah was pretty small. So the fact that we hosted the provincial governor was a really big deal. We'd have a lot of security out on that day. A lot of people came and attended. We even had news cameras, right? It was almost like the big city was coming in to look at the provincial governor visiting the little village of Sarah. So that was a really big deal, something we hosted related to governance. And then this picture right here, this kind of just represents the average man. This guy right here, I'm pretty sure he killed some Russians. I'm pretty sure he would have killed some Americans if we ever crossed him, right? He was just an old, bad man. And by bad, I mean tough, right? He's an old, tough man who has seen some stuff and survived some stuff. He probably far outlasted the life expectancy of 50 years. He's probably in his 60s plus. And he just represents the average Afghan that we were trying to serve in the area. We wanted to make life better for guys just like him. So security, governance, development. Development is really where you start to win in Afghanistan. I've always said, this is based on my very limited experience, but I've always said instead of sending bombs and bullets to Afghanistan, we should send parks and rec. What if we built ski slopes instead of bases? What if we built a reason to want to visit Afghanistan instead of making it a war-torn country? That's what we tried to get to. We tried to get to that with some of these development projects. A couple things you see there, a water reservoir project, I'll talk about that. We tried to build a schoolhouse, and then something we tried to get going was demonstration farms. We tried to show them how they could do stuff, how they could grow stuff other than poppy, because how do you replace poppy on the world market? You grow something else instead. So that was a big part of our mission there. This picture right here is called the Water Reservoir Project. Guys, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a civil engineer. I'm not a mechanical engineer. I'm not a designer. I'm not an architect. I had no idea what I was in charge of. But as the American leader in the area, this was my project. They said, hey, here's these plans. Here's these financial transactions. Here's these receipts. This is a project that my area was responsible for. To this day, I'm not really sure that they have any water collected in this water reservoir project. But the idea was that it was almost like building a dam, almost like collecting water that would run off of the mountains. But I almost think to this day that we kind of got tricked into building this $1 million project in the middle of a desert, because I'm not sure, I never saw any water populate there. So all that to say, sometimes you make a mistake with how you spend your money. And I think that this water reservoir project was probably a mistake in how we spent our tax dollars, because I don't see any water that came out of this project. But as a young person, I was responsible for the workers. I was responsible for the contract. I was responsible for paying them. I would get funds and have to distribute those funds. So it was a big part of the deployment was managing this water reservoir project.
Do soldiers have to pay taxes while in deployment?
While deployed, in any month that you're deployed, that paycheck does not count for taxes. It's a good question. So in my example, I got 9 months of tax-free, income. It's technically it's outside of America, right? If you work outside of America, you don't have to pay taxes during those months either. So let's say you go get a contract job in France or whatever. Good question. Guys, I know I'm talking a lot. I'm trying to drive to the end here. I hope you're interested in some of the pictures you're seeing. This is the big provincial Shura that we hosted. We were hosting city council meetings every week, but this was the big one. This is when the provincial governor came, and we actually had TV cameras. You can see there's people on the rooftops. We thought if we're going to have any trouble at all in Afghanistan, it's going to be on this day. Like if there are Taliban who want to do bad things in the village of Sarah, they're going to do it on this day. And I'm happy to report that we had a very successful day. We did not have any shooting. We did not have any bombs. We did not have any issues at all. We gathered all these people. We had a peaceful gathering with the provincial governor, and it was a very successful day. And that is kind of the highlight, or that is kind of the story that I have to tell, is that I did not get into any shooting matches, right? We did not get into any firefights. I think that winning is when you don't shoot in Afghanistan. So my story is that we had a very large and secure area. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for all of Afghanistan, and my area isn't the same story as all of Afghanistan. But my personal story is that we did not do a lot of shooting. We did way more talking and eating than we did with shooting. And I prefer to fight a war that way, by talking and eating instead of shooting at people. Briefly, I'll kind of take you through a week in the life. This is maybe the interesting stuff where, whoa, what did you actually do? Well, you know what? I had to do a lot of writing. You see the first thing there, daily sit reps. I had to write what I did every single day and tell my next boss about it, right? It's a situation report. What we would do in a day is a lot of patrols and training. Like we would actually keep training. We'd keep up on our marksmanship. We'd make sure that we still, our vehicles were good, all that kind of stuff. The next phrase you see is key leader engagement, and that means eating. KLE is the acronym, and I broke it down for you. What it means is that we would sit, we would talk, we would try to solve problems, and the way we usually did that was over food. And that's kind of where I give you the idea that the only thing, I never got shot at by someone I ate with, because we were actually conversing with each other. We're getting to know each other, and that is a good way to solve your problems. We also got a lot of supply drops from the air. We had some action, and then guess what? We also had a lot of boredom. So here's some pictures represent all that. Eating, and are you even surprised eating? I'm pretty sure, I think I saw a rat crawl through this little space in the midst of our eating. There's a lot of the eating happens with your hands, okay? Now the Afghans would understand that American culturalism would be to use forks and spoons. So every now and then they had like plasticware that they would bring out. We would eat with the plasticware. If we were on our own base and we had our own supplies, we could break out, like the paper trays and the plastic forks and such like that. But whenever we ate with the Afghans, we tried to represent, culturally the way that they would eat. And a lot of times their plates is this just this pad of bread. They wouldn't have individual plates, but the food would just get lined on this bread. And yeah, you would eat with your hands. So big advice I got going into my first sit-down meal was don't drink the water. And don't eat the meat. But sometimes you don't want to offend your hosts. You want to partake in what they put in front of you. So I did eat what was put in front of me. And I can say I never had a problem with that. I never got sick to my stomach or anything like that, but I know a lot of people that did. So we did a lot of eating. And again, every time I ate with someone, I was building a friendship. And every time I built a friendship, I had someone that didn't shoot at me. Lots of eating. As you can see, all my pictures are about sitting and eating with someone else. This is that city council meeting setup that I was talking about. We would go and we would attend. Big open room. One time they asked me to give a speech, totally impromptu, and I was not prepared for it. So I just talk, and I'm sure my interpreter made it make sense or made it not make sense. I don't know. But this is the city council meeting. I remember it being surreal. I distinctly remember this room just being wow, we are here in the middle of Afghanistan. especially at my first one of these. Like, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe this is a real deployment. This is crazy. This is a quick video. I think I can click play on this. This is how we would it sounds crazy to say this, but we fell in on some equipment we weren't familiar with. This is a minigun. This is one of the the fastest shooting rounds per minute guns that is in the American Army. And this is one of my medics training on. So we didn't know how to use these until we got taught how to use them.
I want it.
So all that to say, we were still training with items even as we were in the middle of the war. We were still training even though we were still actively fighting the war. Hydrozik with a mortar tube. My God, we fire mortars at this particular mountain just for practice. Demolition charges. Sometimes we practiced our demolition charges just to make sure we still knew what we were doing. And this is just part of the Afghan adventure. This is just part of the vacation. This is a camel herder walking himself through my dried up riverbed. That's what I'm standing on right there. So obviously we had to go out and take pictures. Just another beautiful day in Afghanistan. This is my driver. Sometimes, we did a lot of walking, but we also did a lot of driving. Sometimes Haji Razik came along with us. That's the inside of an up-armored vehicle. And I like this picture because it really reminds me of what I think it probably looked like on Mars. The red dirt, slightly, it's mountainous and all that. I just, sometimes I wasn't sure if I was in Afghanistan or in Mars. This is an example of a walking patrol. Sometimes we took vehicles, sometimes we walked. This picture always stands out to me because in the midst of the brown and the gray, there's the children who are dressed in bright colors. And then sometimes how do you make friends? Come on now. Whoa. Lost it. Well, that was a picture of giving candy to the kids. Like literally we give candy to the kids. I think they said, Swanson, you're talking too much.
Yes. Right now. I don't know what you said, but
All right, I'm gonna fast forward us and just kind of round it out, okay? I know I got kind of lengthy there. So in the end, this was kind of the height of what I think was my Army career and accomplishments, and it happened really on in my Army career, right? I deployed early, and I haven't deployed since. A lot of people want to deploy, and that's exactly what I got to do when I was 24, but I haven't since. In the end, all the stuff I've showed you, we closed that base down. We were there for about 3.5 months, but then we closed the base down. And the way we closed it down was one helicopter full at a time. That helicopter pulled my vehicles away. It pulled crates of material away until one day I drove away from it and I gave it to the Afghan National Army. But of course, it was really stripped down because we took all of our equipment with us. That is how I left the village of Sarah. I don't know to this day what has become of it. So maybe someday I'll get to go on one of those veterans visits where they take you back to the battlefield or whatever, and I'll see what became of Sarah. This was our last night in the village, and we just kind of had that final dinner with the boys. We traded hats with him, and actually have that hat right there. I traded hats with Zabita right there. This is the maximum that my nasty beard got to, so that is the most facial hair I've ever had. This is my last picture with Sangari, the one Afghan I almost trusted. This is my last picture with Captain Ula and his jacket that I have traded right there. And then this is Corey and myself about to drive away, right? For all the work that we did, all the relationships we built, it was time to transition. We had to walk away. Last little photograph of my police commanders. Final night at the base. And you know what you do on the last night of camp? You sit around the fire and tell some stories. So we We made sure that all my guys knew that their service mattered, their time in Sarah mattered. They made a difference. Whether we know what came of Sarah or not, we feel like we made a difference for while we were there. And then we drove away. And that didn't end my time in Afghanistan, but that did kind of end my time being more or less on the front lines, if you will, because after that I was at a larger base, much more secure and protected, and quite frankly, just less fun. Be serious for a second here, because I want to tell you, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes the fighting in Afghanistan goes wrong, and about 4,000 Americans have died in Afghanistan, but in particular, this is my friend Rex, whose picture you've seen up here since day one. He was killed on March 11th, 2013. He was my squad leader. Now, I was not with him on that day, because remember I told you that when we got to Afghanistan, we all went a bunch of different directions. But he was one of my friends. I trained him. He was my squad leader. And when I heard his name come across the radio as being one of the ones who was killed in action, it was a very formative and devastating experience for me as a young person. Gentleman in the middle, his name is Andrew. He was killed on that day as well. And so was the military working dog. So what happened on this day was an Afghan policeman took an American weapon and turned it towards the Americans and started shooting. A man that they trusted and trained, and with our own American equipment, we were basically betrayed. These Americans were betrayed by an Afghan and shot with American equipment. And unfortunately, these two died and several others were injured on that day. To round out my deployment experience and my story here, sometimes you got to do things you're not prepared for. I mean, being in Afghanistan and leading at a young age, that's one thing. But when Rex was killed, I volunteered to escort his body home, and that was probably the most important mission I had in my time in Afghanistan. So 2 gentlemen you see there, left in the middle, here they are in a flag-draped coffin, ready to head home. This is me with Rex, of course, better days, better times. This is what I want to give you about Rex Shad, right? What I want to say his name. I want to always share about my friend and keep his story alive. This is the Rex Shad that people should remember, right? Rex did not go to wage war, but Rex is someone who was genuinely there to make a difference to the locals. And it's really just kind of captured perfectly in this particular photo right here. This was taken a few weeks before he was killed. And of course, he was killed by someone that he was trying to help. So that is a real tragedy in the particular situation. Rex is from Oklahoma, and that is a big reason I volunteered to take his body home. It's a big reason we connected in the first place, because we were able to tell Oklahoma stories together. And then in escorting his body home, something else I super wasn't prepared for was to speak at his funeral. His family asked me to speak at his funeral. So again, I just give that to you, that sometimes you may be asked to do something you're not prepared to do, but you got to rise to the occasion, and you got to make a difference in the world around you with whatever task you are given. So I was honored to speak at Rex's funeral in March of 2013. And I just want everybody to remember my friend Rex Shad. And sometimes being in Afghanistan is not just a deployment or an adventure or fun. For many people, of course, it was a tragedy in the end of their lives in Afghanistan. If you go to Fort Stewart, there is a path, and it's called Warriors Walk. It's lined with trees. There's one tree for every third ID soldier that has been killed in Iraq or Afghanistan, and this is a picture of Rex's tree. So if you ever get the chance to go to Fort Stewart, Hinesville, whatever reason you're in the area, strongly, I'd give to you the recommendation that you go visit Warriors Walk, because it's a pretty powerful, pretty special place to visit. What else I got here? I thought I hit that slide. Sometimes, so just to kind of finish the way we started, sometimes being in Afghanistan was like teeing off against a hand grenade. Yeah, that's just a funny picture that we took. Dang, I thought I hit the wrong slide. So that brings us to the end of my story here. I did skip a couple slides trying to here's how I want to finish. Yeah, sorry, when those slides crashed, it kind of threw me off, but it's fine. We're getting to the end anyway. This is how I spent Christmas of 2012. What you're going to see here is a bit of a panorama of the base I was in. I showed you those pictures, tried to describe it to you the best I could. But this is how we celebrated Christmas 2012 with a bunch of marking pyrotechnics, okay? Normally, what you're going to see here, they're not fireworks. They're not meant for celebratory fire or anything like that. What they're supposed to be is if you can mark your position by setting off this star cluster. But we had quite a surplus, so this is how we celebrated Christmas and New Year's of 2012. I will show this video and we'll call it a wrap. Stand up. Merry Christmas, Sarah!
Hey, don't send them all the way down. Put them where the red line is. Get to the work.